Let's get more on this now with Temple University Professor of Law and Politics, Susan Sullivan, who joins us from New York. Susan, just break it down briefly, if you would, the key legal bits that we need to understand here, what he's accused of and what the immunity ruling may mean.
Sure. Well, the Washington, D.C. case basically accused Donald Trump of engaging in a whole list of behavior, a whole bunch of conduct that essentially was going to undermine the results of the election that Joseph Biden won. So that trial was about to commence, and Donald Trump put the brakes on it and said, you can't prosecute me. I did all of this when I was president, and therefore I'm immune from prosecution. So that did essentially put the brakes on until the Supreme Court decided whether that was, in fact, the case. And just last month, they came back and they essentially said, well, yes and no. You can be prosecuted as a former president for unofficial acts, for engaging in conduct that basically helps you as an individual, private conduct. But you can't be prosecuted if the acts were official, if they were the acts that you had to engage in as the president to do your job. So that decision has basically bounced this back, as you said, to the original court. Because rather than going forward with a trial now, using all those allegations, the court now has to decide, looking all at these facts, what was official and can therefore not be prosecuted, what was unofficial. So they've really taken two steps back, because now they will have to go through that whole list, talking to the vice president about certifying the election, sending a tweet to protesters. Were those official acts for which you cannot be prosecuted? Were they unofficial? So that's the state of the case now. It's not really the trial that's going to resume, but the case.
Right, and how long might all of these decisions on this range, as you say, of different acts, how long might all that take?
It's going to take months and months. There's been discussion about whether this trial would take place before the election. That's absolutely no way that's going to happen, because when the judge makes these decisions about which acts were official or unofficial, which acts can be prosecuted and not prosecuted, all of that's going to be appealed to the Court of Appeals. And then all of that is going to go up to the Supreme Court again. And the Supreme Court isn't even in session until October, and typically they come out with these important decisions in June. So we're not going to be seeing any kind of trial on the actual underlying allegations anytime soon. That said, I think it's important to note that although we're not going to see a trial, a criminal trial of these allegations, we kind of have a trial going on anyway. As your previous report noted, Kamala Harris is now going up against Donald Trump. That's official. She's a former prosecutor, highly respected, highly successful. We've got Donald Trump, on the other hand, who has already been convicted of 34 counts of fraud. And Kamala Harris is kind of framing this election as prosecutor, law and order against the criminal. And so it's going to be interesting to see whether, although we won't have a jury verdict by the time of the election, the election itself is almost like a trial.
And how that plays out. And Susan, I wonder, Trump aside for a minute, that ruling around presidential immunity, how wide-ranging is that, and what are the implications for US presidents now and in the future? Just how much could they get away with as long as it's done in an official capacity?
Well, that's a very good question, because as I mentioned, these are all of these facts, all of this behavior is going to be analyzed. And every time the president leaves office, then, what is fair game? What kind of behavior can be classified as official or unofficial? Every time this is going to be decided in a court. So the implications for prosecuting a former president are essentially going to muddy this. It is never going to be, unless you've got a former president who robbed a bank, you know, every scenario, every factual scenario is going to be up for argument. So in terms of the broad-reaching implications, it's going to make prosecuting a former president very complex. And of course, that will necessarily mean that any kind of trial or prosecution of any former president is going to take a lot of time. Right now, of course, we're in the middle of this election cycle. The election is imminent, so it has even more sort of pressing gravitas, but it does have implications for any former president, not just Donald Trump in this instance.
Susan Sullivan from New York, thank you so much for your time and insight.
My pleasure.